Hey, join me as I share my roller coaster with Susie after a tough breakup. I swore off relationships, started fresh, but she pulled me in with her charm. Coffee dates, a wild night, then her games. Turns out she had someone else, and it broke me. But I fought to let go. Watch the full story of finding peace again. The breakup hit me hard, but now it's been a while and I'm finally finding some peace. It's been months since Lisa walked out, leaving the apartment too quiet, and I've been picking up the pieces ever since. The first few weeks were a mess, crying on the couch, replaying every fight, but I've settled into a routine that feels like mine. Mornings start with coffee, black and strong, and I sit at the kitchen table, looking out at the street. No one's yelling, no one's slamming doors, and that silence is starting to feel good. I've decided I'm done with relationships for now. No more drama, no more trying to fix someone else's mess. I've been focusing on myself. After work, I hit the gym, lifting weights until my arms ache, and it clears my head. I used to spend that time texting Lisa, begging her come back, but now I just listen to music and push myself. At home, I've been fixing things, replaced a leaky faucet last week, painted the bedroom walls a calm gray. It's not perfect, but it's mine and I like to control. I cook dinner too, simple stuff like pasta or steak, and eat alone, no one judging my choices. The TV stays off most nights, and I read instead old novels I never got to. It's slow, but it's working. The decision to stay single came after a long talk with myself. One night, I was on the couch, scrolling through dating apps and deleted them all. I thought about how Lisa's jealousy ruined us. She hated my late hours, my friends, and realized I don't want that again. I told my buddy Mike over beers, saying, I'm done with women for a while. And he laughed, saying, good luck with that. I meant it, though. The freedom of not answering to anyone is new, and I'm sticking to it. No more late-night calls. No more explaining myself. Just me and my space. Work's been a steady distraction. I'm in sales, and the office keeps me busy with calls and meetings. Last week, I closed a big deal, and the boss patted my back, saying, keep it up. I smiled, but inside I was proud. I did that without leaning on anyone. After work, I grab a sandwich from the deli down the street, eating on a bench, watching people go by. No one's asking where I've been or who I'm with, and it's refreshing. I've started jogging too, early mornings before the city wakes up, and it's just me and the pavement, figuring things out. The calm isn't perfect, though. Some nights, I lie in bed, the room dark, and think about Lisa. I wonder if she's happy, if she regrets it, but I push it away. I've got routine now. Wake up, work out, work, eat, sleep, and it keeps the loneliness at bay. One evening, I met Mike again, and he asked, you sure about no dating? I nodded, saying, yeah, I need this for me. He shrugged, but I felt solid. I've been sketching too, random lines on paper, and it's helping me think straight. The apartment's starting to feel like a home again, not a battleground. I've been avoiding old haunts. The coffee shop where Lisa and I used to go is off limits, so I found a new one a few blocks away. It's quieter, with old wooden tables, and I sit there with my laptop, working or just zoning out. No memories there, just a fresh start. I've been saving money too, putting aside what I used to spend on dates, and I'm thinking about a trip somewhere solo, maybe the coast. The idea of being alone with my thoughts doesn't scare me anymore. It feels like a reward. I've even started meditating. 10 minutes a day, breathing deep, and it's weird how much it helps. The freedom's sinking in. I rearranged the living room last weekend, moving the couch to face the window, and it changed the whole vibe. I watch the sunset sometimes. No one nagging me to hurry up, and it's nice. I've been sleeping better too. No arguments waking me up, and I wake up feeling lighter. One afternoon, I ran into an old coworker, Jen, and she asked about Lisa. I said, we're done and I'm good with that. And she smiled, saying, you look better. I took it as a win. I've been cooking more. Tried a new chili recipe, and it turned out okay. Enough for leftovers. I'm building something solid. The next day, I tackled the backyard, pulling weeds and setting up a small patio chair. It's not much, but it's a space for me, somewhere to sit with a book or just think. I've been writing too, jotting down thoughts in a notebook, and it's helping me let go. One night, I sat out there, the air cool, and decided I'm not rushing into anything. No new relationships, no new fights, just me figuring out who I am. The calm's fragile, but it's mine and I'm holding on to it. The week ended with a quiet victory. I finished a work project early, treated myself to a movie, and laughed alone in the theater. Back home, I made tea, sitting at the table, and looked around. The place was clean, the walls gray, the air still. I thought about Lisa less, and when I did, it didn't hurt as much. I told myself, this is enough, and meant it. The next morning I woke up, stretched, and started the day, coffee, gym, work, feeling like I was finally on solid ground. No one else needed, just me and my peace. Starting a new job felt like a fresh start, and I was ready to keep my focus on myself. I'd landed a position at a small marketing firm, and my first day was a Monday morning. I woke up early, made coffee, and dressed in a clean shirt, feeling good about the change. The office was a short walk, and I got there with time to spare, settling into a desk by the window. The team was friendly. Quick hellos, a few handshakes, and I thought I could handle this without any drama. Then she walked in and everything shifted. Her name was Susie, and the moment our eyes met, I felt a jolt I didn't want. She was introduced during the morning meeting. The boss, Mark, said, "This is Susie, our new project coordinator." And she smiled, her dark hair falling over one shoulder. I nodded, trying to play it cool, but her glance lingered on me a second longer than the others. She had this energy, confident, warm, and I caught myself staring. I shook it off, telling myself, no relationships, remember? I focused on the agenda, taking notes, but my mind kept drifting to her laugh when Mark cracked a joke. I pushed the feeling down, deciding to keep my distance. This job was about me, not some crush. The day moved fast. I worked on a client pitch, typing away, and Susie sat across the room, coordinating with the design team. I overheard her voice, soft but firm, talking about deadlines, and it stuck with me. At lunch, I grabbed a sandwich from the break room, eating alone by the window, when she walked in with a salad. "Mind if I join?" she asked, and I said, "Sure," even though I wanted to say no. We talked about the job, her last role, my move here, and she was easy to talk to, asking about my favorite campaigns. I kept it short, but her smile made my stomach flip. The internal battle started. After lunch, I went back to my desk, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she laughed. I told myself, you're done with this, remembering Lisa's jealousy and my promise to stay single. But part of me wanted to know more, where she was from, what she liked. I caught her looking my way once, and I looked down fast, pretending to check emails. I spent the afternoon on the pitch, forcing myself to stay on task, but her presence was like a hum in the background. I decided to avoid her, sticking to work mode. It got harder. Around 3, Susie came over with a file, saying, "Thought you might need this a pitch." Her hand brushed mine as she handed it over, and I felt a spark. "Thanks," I mumbled, avoiding her gaze, and she smiled, saying, "No problem," before walking off. I sat there, heart pounding, and told myself to get a grip. I worked late, finishing the pitch, and she stayed too, typing nearby. I overheard her hum a tune, and it threw me off. I packed up, saying goodnight to the team, but her "see you tomorrow" lingered in my head as I left. The walk home was a mess. I stopped at a park bench, sitting with my coffee cup from earlier, and thought about her. I liked her vibe, smart, funny, but I didn't want to go back to the chaos of dating. I remembered Lisa's fights, how they drained me, and decided Susie was off limits. But the way she looked at me kept replaying, and I felt that pull I'd sworn to ignore. I threw the cup in the trash, telling myself, stick to the plan, and headed home. The apartment was quiet, just me and hum the fridge, and I tried to shake her off. I distracted myself. That night, I cooked pasta, blasting music to fill the space, and worked on a sketch. Random lines, nothing special. I thought about the job, the pitch, anything but Susie, but her face kept popping up. I called Mike, saying, "New job's good, but there's this girl," and he laughed. "Oh, trouble." I told him, "I'm not going there," and he said, "Good luck fighting that." I hung up, feeling unsteady, and watched TV, some action movie, to keep my mind busy. Her smile flashed in my head, and I turned it off, going to bed early. The next day, I braced myself. I got to work, nodding to the team, and saw Susie at her desk, already on a call. I kept my head down, working on the pitch edits, but she came by with coffee, saying, "Thought you might need this." I took it, saying, "Thanks," and she lingered, asking, "How's it going?" I kept it short. "Good, just busy," and she nodded, walking off. My hand shook a little, and I told myself, no way. I spent the day focused, avoiding her eyes, but that internal tug wouldn't quit. I left on time, walking home, and decided to double down on my no relationship rule. I held firm. That evening, I hit the gym, pushing weights harder than usual, and thought about my calm. I didn't want to lose it for someone new, especially not now. Back home, I made tea, sitting by the window and watched the streetlights. I told myself Susie was just a co-worker, nothing more, and I'd prove it. The next morning, I woke up, stretched, and got ready for work, ready to keep my distance. Her appearance had shaken me, but I was determined to stay in control, no matter how much I felt that pull. A few days into the new job, I couldn't shake Susie from my mind, and I decided to take a chance. I'd been holding back, sticking to my no relationship rule, but her presence at work kept pulling me in. That morning, I got to the office early, made coffee in the break room, and sat at my desk, going over a client brief. She walked in, her hair up, carrying a stack of files, and smiled at me. My stomach flipped, and I thought, why not? I waited until lunch, then caught her by the printer, saying, "Hey, want to grab coffee after work?" She paused and said, "Sure, sounds good," and I felt a rush I didn't expect. We met at a small cafe down the street after work. I got there first, ordering a black coffee, and picked a table by the window. Susie showed up, sliding into the seat across from me with a latte, and her smile was warm. We started talking about the job, how the team was settling, a funny mix-up with a deadline, and it flowed easy. Her voice was soft but clear, and she had this way of listening that made me want to keep going. I told her about my last role, keeping it light, and she shared how she'd moved here for the job, leaving a tough breakup behind. It felt natural, like we'd known each other longer. The conversation deepened. She asked about my interests, and I mentioned sketching, pulling out my phone to show a quick doodle. She leaned in, saying, "That's really good," and her closeness made my heart beat faster. I asked about her, and she talked about hiking, her eyes lighting up, describing a trail she loved. I laughed at her story about getting lost, and she grinned, saying, "I'm a mess sometimes." It was perfect, too perfect, and I caught myself thinking she might be someone special. I pushed that thought down, reminded myself to keep it friendly, but her laugh kept pulling me back. We stayed longer than planned. The cafe got quieter as people left, and we ordered another round. Tea for her, coffee for me. She asked about my breakup, and I kept it short, saying, "It was messy, but I'm over it." She nodded, saying, "I get that," and shared how her ex had been controlling, which explained her move. I felt a connection, like we'd both been through similar battles, and it made her seem even better. We talked about movies next, finding we both like old comedies, and she mimicked a line, making me laugh hard. It was too easy, and I wondered if I was letting my guard down too fast. I noticed little things. Her hands moved when she talked, graceful but casual, and she had a habit of tucking her hair behind her ear. I caught myself watching, and she smiled, saying, "You're quiet. Everything okay?" I nodded, saying, "Yeah, just enjoying this." And she blushed a little. We swapped work stories. Hers about a client who demanded a neon logo, mine about a typo that went viral, and it felt like we clicked. I checked the time, surprised it was past 8, and said, "We should head out." She agreed, but her look lingered, and I felt that pull again, stronger this time. The walk back was light. We strolled toward the office to get our cars, the night air cool, and she said, "This was fun." I agreed, saying, "Yeah, we should do it again sometime." Keeping it casual, she nodded, saying, "Definitely," and we parted with a wave. I drove home, my mind buzzing, and sat on the couch, replaying her voice. I told myself, it's just coffee, but deep down, I knew it was more. I made tea, trying to settle, but her laugh echoed, and I sketched her smile without meaning to. I stopped, tearing the page, and went to bed, determined to keep control. The next day, I was distracted. At work, I worked on a presentation, but my eyes kept drifting to her desk. She caught me once waving, and I nodded back, focusing hard. At lunch, I ate alone, replaying our talk, and decided to keep it professional. But when she passed by with a file saying, "Great coffee last night," I smiled, saying, "Yeah, it was." Her tone was easy, and I felt that connection again. I spent the afternoon on the presentation, forcing myself to stay on track, but her presence was hard to ignore. I left on time, walking home, and told myself to slow down. I talked to Mike that night. Over the phone, I said, "I had coffee with this girl from work," and he laughed. "Told you you'd cave." I said, "It's not like that, just friendly," but he didn't buy it. I hung up, sitting with my sketchbook, and thought about her perfection. She seemed ideal, smart, funny kind, but that too easy feeling nagged at me. I decided to take it slow, no rushing, and went to bed, her voice in my head. The next morning, I woke up, made coffee, and got ready for work, ready to see her but determined to stay cautious. A week after our coffee date, Susie and I planned a real night out, and it felt like a step I wasn't sure about. I'd been keeping things light at work, sticking to my no relationship rule, but her smile and the way we clicked kept pulling me in. She suggested a restaurant downtown, saying it's got great food, and I agreed, figuring one night wouldn't hurt. I got ready, showered, put on a nice shirt, and drove over, my stomach in knots. The place was cozy, dim lights, soft music, and she was waiting at the table, looking sharp in a black top. We ordered drinks, wine for her, beer for me, and it started off easy. The evening flowed. We talked about work, laughing about a client's wild request for a purple ad, and she leaned in, saying, "You handle that well." The food came, pasta for me, fish for her, and it was good, but I was more focused on her. She had this way of looking at me, her eyes bright, and I felt that pull again. We shared a dessert, some chocolate thing, and she fed me a bite, laughing when I missed my mouth. I said, "Your trouble?" And she grinned, saying, "Maybe a little." The wine hit, and we danced a bit by the jukebox, her hand in mine, and it felt right, too right. We ended up at my place. After the restaurant, she suggested, "Let's keep the night going," and I hesitated but said, "Sure, come over." We drove separately, and when she walked in, she kicked off her shoes, looking around. I put on some music, low and mellow, and we sat on the couch with more wine. The vibe shifted. Her hand brushed my knee, and we kissed, soft at first, then deeper. It was passionate, intense, and I let go, forgetting my rules. We moved to the bedroom, clothes staying on, but the closeness overwhelming, and it felt like a connection I hadn't had in years. Morning came, and everything changed. I woke up to sunlight, her beside me, but she was off. She sat up fast, looking around like she didn't know where she was, and said, "I should go." I rubbed my eyes, saying, "You okay?" But she wouldn't meet my gaze. She grabbed her phone, muttering, "Yeah, just late," and started dressing. I watched confused and asked, "What's wrong?" She shook her head, saying, "Nothing, I just need to leave." Her voice tight. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I didn't push, just nodded as she pulled on her shoes. Her phone rang. It was loud, cutting to the quiet, and she answered fast, stepping into the hall. I couldn't hear much, just her saying, "I'll be there," her tone sharp. She came back, avoiding my eyes, and said, "I have to go work stuff." I said, "On a Saturday," but she just grabbed her bag, saying, "Emergency." I walked to the door, saying, "Call me later?" And she nodded, but it felt empty. She left without a hug, the door clicking shut, and I stood there, the apartment suddenly cold. I couldn't figure it out. I made coffee, sitting at the table, and replayed the night. The kiss, the closeness. It had been real, but her rush to leave threw me. I checked my phone, no message, and wondered if I'd misread everything. I cleaned up, tossing the wine glasses in the sink, and thought about her strange vibe. Was it guilt? Regret? I didn't know, but it left me uneasy. I called Mike, saying, "Had a night with Susie, but she bolted." And he said, "Weird. Maybe she's got baggage." I agreed, hanging up, and paced the living room, trying to shake it. The day dragged. I worked out, lifting weights, but my mind was on her. I showered, made lunch, sandwiches, but barely ate, just staring at the TV. I thought about texting her, asking what happened, but stopped myself, not wanting to seem desperate. I fixed a squeaky door hinge instead, needing to do something, and kept wondering why she left like that. By evening, I sat on the couch, the place quiet, and decided to wait. If she called, fine. If not, I'd move on. But her face, tense, distant, stuck with me. I stayed cautious. The next day, I went for a run, the air crisp, and thought about the night. It had been good, maybe too good, and her exit felt like a warning. Back home, I made tea, sitting by the window, and told myself to slow down. I sketched random lines and tried to push her out of my head, but her voice echoed. I went to bed early, the room dark, and listened for my phone. No call came, and I wondered if I'd opened a door I couldn't close. The next morning, I woke up, made coffee, and got ready for work, bracing for whatever came next. The week after that strange night with Susie left me on edge, and her behavior at work made it worse. I went in Monday morning, coffee in hand, determined to act normal, but she was already at her desk, typing away like nothing happened. I said, "Morning," and she nodded, barely looking up, which threw me. I sat at my desk, working on a report, but kept glancing her way, wondering if I'd imagined connection. Then mid-morning, she stopped by with a file, smiling, and said, "Good job on that pitch last week." I said, "Thanks," confused, and she lingered a second before walking off. It felt like a game, and I didn't know the rules. Things shifted fast. At lunch, I grabbed a sandwich, eating alone when she joined me, saying, "Mind if I sit?" We talked about a new project, her voice light, and she laughed at a joke I made. It was like the night before, easy, flirty. But then she got a call, stood up, and left without a word. I sat there, half-eaten sandwich in hand, thinking, what's her deal? Back at my desk, I focused on emails, but she passed by later, brushing my arm, and whispered, "See you for coffee later?" I nodded, my head spinning, and wondered if I was reading too much into it. We met for coffee after work. The same cafe, same table, and she was all smiles, asking about my day. I said, "It was okay, you?" And she leaned in saying, "Better now." We talked about movies, her picking a rom-com I'd seen, and it felt good. Her hand near mine, her laugh soft. But then she checked her phone. Her face changed, and she said, "I have to go." I asked, "Everything okay?" And she said, "Yeah, just busy," rushing out. I sat there, coffee cooling, and felt like she was playing with me, hot one minute, cold the next. The pattern continued. Next day at work, she ignored me, chatting with the design team like I didn't exist. I worked on a presentation, trying to shake it, but she caught my eye once, winking, and I froze. Later, she brought me a report, her hand lingering, and said, "You're doing great," her tone warm. I said, "Thanks," but kept it short, unsure. That afternoon, she asked me to help with a spreadsheet, and we sat close, her shoulder brushing mine. It felt intimate, but when I joked, she pulled back, saying, "Let's focus." And I was lost again. This back and forth was driving me crazy. I started questioning it. That evening, I called Mike, saying, "Susie's all over the place, flirting, then ignoring me." He laughed, saying, "Sounds like she's toying with you." I said, "Maybe, but I don't get it." And he suggested, "She might just like the chase." I hung up, sitting on the couch, and thought about her mood swings. I made dinner, chicken and rice, but barely ate, my mind on her. I sketched, trying to clear my head, but drew her eyes by accident. I tore the page, telling myself to back off. But the next day, I was still hooked. Work got weirder. Wednesday, she acted cold, walking past without a glance, and I buried myself in a client call. Then at lunch, she sat with me again, saying, "Missed you yesterday," like nothing happened. We talked about a weekend plan, her suggesting a hike, and I said, "Sounds fun," feeling that pull. But when I asked about her rush last time, she dodged, saying, "Just work stuff," and changed the subject. I left the break room, my sandwich untouched, and spent the afternoon on the presentation, her games messing with my focus. I tried to figure her out. That night, I went for a run, the air cool, and thought about her signals. 1 minute she's close. The next she's gone was intentional. Back home, I made tea, sitting by the window, and decided to play it cool. The next day, I kept my distance, nodding at work, but she came over with coffee, saying, "Peace offering?" I took it, saying, "Thanks." And she smiled, but I didn't bite. Later, she flirted again, asking about my sketch, and I said, "Just a hobby," keeping it short. Her laugh faded, and I felt in control for now. The week ended rough. Friday, she was distant again, working with the team, and I finished a report, ignoring her. But at quitting time, she said, "Coffee tomorrow?" I hesitated, saying, "Maybe," and she pouted, walking off. I drove home, my head a mess, and cooked pasta, eating alone. I called Mike again, saying she's driving me nuts, and he said, "Walk away or figure her out." I hung up, sitting with my sketchbook, and wondered if I was the one losing. The next morning, I woke up, made coffee, and decided to confront her. Whatever she was doing, I needed to know. A couple of weeks after Susie's hot and cold games, I realized I was hooked, and it scared me. I'd been telling myself to keep my distance, but every time she smiled or brushed by, I felt that pull. At work, I started watching for her steps down the hall, the way she tapped her pen. I caught myself waiting for her texts, checking my phone during breaks, and it hit me. I was depending on her. That Monday, I sat at my desk, working on a proposal, but my eyes kept drifting to her, laughing with the team. I knew something was off, but I couldn't step back. She had me. It got worse fast. After work, she texted coffee tomorrow, and I said yes before thinking. We met at the cafe, and she was all charm, asking about my weekend. I said, just ran, cooked, and she leaned in saying, "You're so put together." We talked about a new campaign, her hand near mine, and I felt alive. But when her phone buzzed, she checked it, her face shifting, and said, "Gotta run." I asked again, and she smiled, "Work stuff," leaving me with a cold coffee. I sat there, frustrated, but already waiting for the next time. I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't stop. She came over again. A few days later, she suggested, "Let's hang out," and I invited her to my place. We watched a movie, her head on my shoulder, and it felt good, too good. We kissed, slow and deep, and ended up on the couch, close but not crossing lines. She stayed late, talking about her hiking trips, and I hung on every word. Morning came, and she was cheerful, making tea, saying, "This is nice." I agreed, but when her phone rang, she tensed, grabbed her bag, and said, "I'll call you," rushing out. I stood there, the tea cold, and felt that dependence deepen. I started noticing red flags. At work, she'd flirt, winking across the room, bringing me coffee, then go silent, chatting with others. I'd catch her on calls, her voice low, and wonder who she was talking to. I asked Mike about it, saying, "Susie's got me waiting on her," and he said, "Sounds like trouble. Cut it if it's bad." I nodded, but didn't. I spent the afternoon on a report, my focus shot, and realized I was ignoring the signs. She was unpredictable, and I was hooked, even though I knew it might hurt. I went home, cooked pasta, but barely ate, my mind on her. The dependence grew. That weekend, I waited for her text, pacing the living room, sketching random lines to distract myself. She finally called Sunday, saying, "Missed you," and I melted, saying, "Me too." We met for a walk, her hand brushing mine, and I felt that high again, but she cut it short, saying, "Got plans," and left me standing there. I drove home, sat on the couch, and thought, this isn't normal. I knew something was wrong, her rushed exits, her secrets, but I kept going back. I called Mike again, saying, "I can't quit her," and he sighed, "You're in deep." I tried to fight it. Next day at work, I kept my distance, nodding but not engaging. She noticed, coming over the file, "Say, you okay?" I said, "Yeah, just busy," and she frowned, walking off. I spent the day on a presentation, forcing focus, but my phone buzzed with her text, "Miss you," and I caved, replying, "Me too." That evening, I hit the gym, lifting weights, trying to clear my head, but her face stayed. Back home, I made tea, sitting by the window, and admitted I was stuck. I wanted out, but the pull was too strong. It hit home. A few days later, she flirted again, asking about my sketches, and I showed her one. She said, "You're talented," her hand on my arm, and I felt that rush. But when her phone rang, she stepped away, her voice hushed, and I overheard, "Later, okay?" I pretended not to hear, but it gnawed at me. I went home, cooked chicken, but left it sitting with my sketchbook. I knew she was hiding something, but I couldn't walk away. I called Mike, saying, "She's got someone else, doesn't she?" And he said, "Maybe. Watch yourself." I hung up, the silence heavy. I was in too deep. The next day, I worked late, avoiding her, but she stayed too, saying, "Let's talk." We sat in the break room, her close, and I felt that pull. She said, "You've been off," and I said, "You keep leaving." She smiled, dodging, and I let it go, not ready to lose her. That night, I lay in bed, her scent on my couch, and knew I was dependent. I wanted to break free, but every time she came back, I fell. The next morning, I woke up, made coffee, and went to work, dreading her next move but unable to resist. A few days after realizing how deep I was with Susie, the truth started unraveling and it hit me hard. I'd been waiting for her next move, stuck in that dependence. But something fell off after her last rushed exit. At work, I was at my desk, finishing a report, when I overheard her on a call, her voice low, saying, "I'll be home soon." I didn't think much of it until she hung up fast, catching my eye with a nervous smile. That night, I couldn't shake it, so I called Mike, saying, "I think Susie's got someone else." He said, "Dig into it," and I decided to find out. It started with a clue. The next day, I noticed her phone light up during a meeting, a name flashing, Dan, and she silenced it quick. I pretended to focus on the slides, but my mind raced. After work, we grabbed coffee, and she was her usual self, laughing about a client mix-up. I asked, busy night? Keeping it casual, and she said, yeah, just stuff, her eyes dodging mine. I let it go, but when she left early, I followed at a distance, seeing her get into a car with a guy. My stomach dropped, and I knew I had to dig deeper. I started asking around. At the office, I chatted with Jen from design, saying, Susie's got a busy life, huh? She shrugged, saying, yeah, she's got a boyfriend, I think, Dan, maybe? I acted surprised, thanking her, and went back to my desk, my head spinning. That evening, I cooked pasta, but barely ate, scrolling social media instead. I found her profile, saw a tagged photo, her and a guy, Dan, at a restaurant. The caption was old, but it looked recent. I sat there, the plate cold, and realized she had someone steady, not just a fling. I kept digging. The next day, I asked Mike to help, saying, can you check this guy out? He works in IT, and he found a LinkedIn profile. Dan, a manager at a rival firm, married. I felt sick, sitting on the couch with a beer, staring at the screen. I thought about her rushed calls, her strange mornings, and it clicked. She was juggling us. I went for a run, the air sharp, trying to clear my head, but the image of her with him stuck. Back home, I made tea, paced in the kitchen, and decided to confront her, but not yet. Work got tense. Susie flirted as usual, bringing me coffee, saying, you look tired, and I forced a smile, saying, long night. I watched her closer, her quick texts, her nervous laughs, and pieced it together. One afternoon, she stepped out for a call, and I overheard Dan calm down before she lowered her voice. I pretended to work, but my hands shook. That night, I called Mike again, saying she was a married guy, and he said, man, get out. I nodded, but I was too far in to walk away. I learned more. The next day, I asked Jen casually, how long Susie known Dan? She said, years, I think they're tight. I thanked her, going back to my desk, and searched online, found old posts, them at events, smiling. It wasn't new. It was serious. I spent the afternoon on presentation, my focus shot, and thought about her games. That evening I cooked chicken, but left it, sitting with my sketchbook, drawing her face, then scratching it out. I knew she didn't know what she wanted, and I was caught in it. I couldn't stop. The next day, I followed her at lunch, seeing her meet Dan at a park. They hugged, talked close, and I turned away, my chest tight. Back at work, she acted normal, asking about my sketches, and I said, just messing around, keeping it short. That night, I lay in bed, her scent on my couch, and admitted I was obsessed. I called Mike, saying I saw them, and he said, you need to end this. I agreed, but the next morning I woke up, made coffee, and went to work, still drawn to her, needing to know more. After finding out about Dan, I should have walked away from Susie, but I couldn't. The truth, her with a married guy, gnawed at me, yet I stayed hooked, my insides tearing apart. At work, I sat at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet, but my mind was on her, laughing with the team across the room. I knew she was using me for attention, not choosing anyone, and it hurt, but I kept going back. That morning, she brought me coffee, saying, you look off, and I forced a smile, saying, just tired, avoiding her eyes. I was a mess inside, but I couldn't let go. The dependency deepened. After work, she texted, want to hang? And I said yes, even though I knew better. We met at my place, and she was all smiles, sitting close on the couch. We watched a movie, her hand on my arm, and I felt that rush, even knowing she'd leave for Dan. She kissed me, soft at first, and I let it happen, the pain mixing with the high. When her phone buzzed, she checked it, her face shifting, and said, I have to go. I asked him again, and she dodged, saying, just work, rushing out. I sat there, the TV humming, and hated myself for wanting her back. I couldn't break free. The next day at work, she acted normal, asking about a report, and I played along, saying, it's done. But inside, I was breaking. Every flirt, every dodge, cutting deeper. I called Mike, saying, I know she's with someone, but I can't stop. And he said, you're hurting yourself, man. I agreed, but didn't act. I spent the afternoon on a presentation, my hands shaking, and thought about her games. That evening, I cooked steak, but left it, sitting with my sketchbook, drawing her, then tearing it up. The pain was constant, but I stayed. She kept pulling me in. A few days later, she invited me for coffee, and I went, sitting across from her, her smile lighting me up. We talked about a new project, her hand brushing mine, and I felt alive until her phone rang, and she stepped away, whispering. I overheard, "Tonight, Dan," and my chest tightened. She came back, acting like nothing, and I said, "You're with him, aren't you?" She paused and said, "It's complicated," and I let it drop, the hurt swallowing me. I drove home, the night quiet, and sat on the couch, replaying it. I was stuck. At work, she flirted again, winking during a meeting, and I nodded, my heart sinking. I worked late, avoiding her, but she stayed, saying, "Let's talk." We sat in the break room, her close, and I felt that pull. She said, "You're distant," and I said, "I know about you," but didn't push. She smiled, changing the subject, and I let her, the pain a dull ache. That night, I went for a run, the air cold, trying to outrun it, but her face stayed. Back home, I made tea, pacing, and admitted I was addicted to her attention. The struggle was real. The next day, I kept my distance, nodding at work, but she came over a file, saying, "Missed you." I said, "I'm busy," but my voice cracked. She frowned, walking off, and I spent the afternoon on emails, my focus gone. That evening, I cooked pasta, eating alone, and thought about leaving her behind. But when she texted, "Can I come over?" I said yes, the pain winning. She showed up, kissed me, and I let it happen, knowing she'd leave for Dan. I lay in bed later, her scent lingering, and felt the inner break widen. I couldn't escape. A few days later, she flirted at work, asking about my sketches, and I showed her one, her hand on mine, but her phone buzzed and she stepped away, saying, "Be there soon," to someone. I pretended not to hear, but it hurt. That night, I called Mike, saying, "She's killing me," and he said, "Walk away now." I wanted to, but the next day, I woke up, made coffee, and went to work, still drawn to her. The pain was constant, but her attention kept me there, my inner self splitting apart. A week after my inner break with Susie, I knew it had to end, but I wasn't ready for how empty it would feel. I'd been holding on, despite the pain, and she texted, "Let's meet tonight," like nothing was wrong. I agreed, figured it was my chance to face her, but inside I was hollow. That evening, I got home from work, changed into a clean shirt, and made coffee, trying to steady myself. She showed up at my place, looking the same, dark hair loose, that smile, and I let her in, my heart sinking. We sat on the couch, the TV off, and I pretended everything was fine, but the silence between us was heavy. We talked at first. She asked about a project, saying, "You killed it at work," and I nodded, saying, "Thanks, just keeping busy." Her voice was light, and she leaned back, sipping the tea I made her, but I could barely focus. We chatted about a movie she liked, her laughing at a scene she described, and I forced a smile, feeling detached. Inside, I was empty. Every flirt, every dodge had worn me down. I wanted to ask about Dan, about us, but I held back, watching her sip, her hand near mine, and felt like a lie. The night dragged, and I knew it was the last time. I confronted her. After a while, I took a breath and said, "We need to talk." She looked at me, her smile fading, and said, "About what?" I said, "You, me, Dan, what's this?" She froze, her eyes dropping, and didn't answer. I pushed, saying, "I know about him, Susie. What are we doing?" She stared at her tea, then said, "It's complicated." Her voice flat. I waited, my chest tight, but she didn't explain. I said, "I deserve more than this," and she nodded, but her silence was louder than words. The emptiness grew, and I felt like I was talking to a stranger. She didn't fight. I expected anger, tears, something, but she just sat there, looking away. I said, "Why keep this up?" And she shrugged, saying, "I don't know what I want." It stung. Her honesty was cold, admitting she needed attention, not me. I sat back, the couch creaking, and felt the weight of it. We sat in silence, the clock ticking, and I stared at the wall, the room dim. She finished her tea, setting the cup down, and I knew she wouldn't stay. I wanted to yell, to walk away, but I just watched, the emptiness swallowing me. She left without a word. After a long pause, she stood, grabbing her bag, and said, "I should go." I didn't stop her, just nodded, my voice gone. She walked to the door, not looking back, and I followed, the air thick. She opened it, stepped out, and closed it behind her. No hug, no glance, just gone. I stood there, the lock clicking, and felt nothing but a void. I went to the kitchen, poured the rest of the coffee down the sink, and sat at the table, staring at her empty cup. The night was quiet, and I realized she'd taken more than I thought. I tried to process. That night, I paced the living room, the place feeling bigger without her. I called Mike, saying she left no answer, and he said, "Good riddance, man." I agreed, but the emptiness stayed. I cooked pasta, eating alone, but it tasted bland. I thought about her games, her with Dan, and how I'd let it happen. I sat on the couch, the TV off, and sketched, but the lines were shaky, reflecting my mess. I tore the page, lying in bed later, her scent faint, and listened for a car. It didn't come, and the silence hurt. The next day was worse. At work, I avoided her desk, focusing on a report, but saw her laughing with the team. I nodded when she waved, keeping it short, and spent the afternoon on emails, my mind blank. That evening, I went for a run. The air cool, trying to outrun the void, but it followed. Back home, I made tea, sitting by the window, and thought about her leaving. I wanted to call to demand answers, but stopped. Her silence was the answer. I lay in bed, the room dark, and felt the last of her fade, leaving me hollow. I held on to nothing. The next day, I worked late, finishing presentation, and she passed by saying, "Good job." Like always, I said, "Thanks," but didn't look up. That night, I cooked chicken, eating alone, and sat with my sketchbook, drawing nothing. I called Mike again, saying it's over, and he said, "Time to heal." I nodded, but the emptiness lingered. The next morning, I woke up, made coffee, and went to work, seeing her across the room. I didn't wait for her anymore, but the void stayed, a quiet ache I couldn't shake. A few months after that last empty night with Susie, I finally started letting go, and the silence stopped hurting. I hadn't called her, and she hadn't reached out, which felt like a sign. I'd been living day to day, working, eating, sleeping, but the void was fading. One morning, I woke up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the street. The apartment was mine again, no tension, no waiting, and I felt a shift. I decided to move on, for real this time, and started small, cleaning out the fridge, tossing old stuff she'd left. Work got easier. I saw her at the office, her desk across the room, but it didn't sting like before. One day she waved, and I nodded back, keeping it short, no lingering, no chase. I focused on a new campaign, putting in extra hours, and the boss said, "Great work," which felt good. At lunch, I ate alone, a sandwich from the deli, and didn't look for her. Jen asked, "You okay with Susie?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm past it," and meant it. The routine, work, home, quiet, started to feel solid. I ran into her by chance. One afternoon, I was grabbing coffee at the new cafe, and she walked in with Dan. They didn't see me, but I saw them, close, laughing, and I just nodded to myself, turning back to my cup. I left without a word, driving home, and sat on the couch, thinking it through. It hurt a little, but not like before. I called Mike, saying, saw Susie with Dan, and he said, "Good you didn't react." I agreed, hanging up and cooked pasta, eating it all, feeling lighter. The silence was mine now. I started rebuilding. That weekend, I painted the living room a warm beige, the old gray too tied to her. I moved the couch, set up a chair by the window, and sat there with a book. It was peaceful, no echoes of her voice. I went for runs, the air cool, and thought about letting go, not forgiving, just releasing. One evening, I sketched, drawing a tree, not her face, and kept the page. I called Mike again, saying, "I'm doing better," and he said, "That's the spirit." I hung up, smiling a bit, the house quiet but full. Time kept healing. A few weeks later, I took a solo trip to the coast, driving with the windows down, no one check in with. I walked the beach, the waves loud, and felt free. Back home, I cooked steak, eating on the new chair, and thought about how far I'd come. At work, Susie nodded when we passed, and I returned it, no pull, no pain. I spent the afternoon on a report, my focus sharp, and realized I wasn't waiting anymore. That night, I lay in bed, the room dark, and slept without listening for her. The silence was my payback. One day, I saw her in the break room, chatted with the team, and felt nothing, just a guy doing his job. I grabbed my coffee, nodded, and walked out, the cup warm in my hand. That evening, I hit the gym, lifting weights, and thought about how the quiet was my strength. I cooked chicken, eating alone, and sat with my sketchbook, drawing the coast. I called Mike, saying, "I'm good now," and he said, "Proud of you." I hung up the night still and knew the real cost, her leaving, had turned into my peace. I was done. The next week, I finished a big project and the team celebrated. Susie was there, smiling, but I didn't care. I drove home, made tea, and sat by the window, watching the streetlights. I thought about Lisa, about Susie, and let them go. No anger, just calm. The next morning, I woke up, stretched, and made coffee, ready for the day. At work, I saw her across the room, nodded once, and turned to my desk. I didn't look back, didn't wait. The silence was my truth, and I was finally okay with it.